Last night I talked to my girlfriend, and she and I were talking about the video that I made, doing a TED Talk, and how I didn't really think my story was inspirational. And she asked me, she said, "Do you really believe that your story is not inspirational to people?" And I said, "Absolutely not. My story is basic. It's not wildly intriguing. I'm a guy who did some things, made a bunch of poor decisions, and got lucky when it came to YouTube." And over the course of the next hour and a half, which is a conversation I won't go in depth into because, our lives are not on display for the world to see, she essentially summed it up by saying, what makes you inspirational is not the choices that you made. It's the conclusion you came to after making those choices. It's what those life experiences made you into and the person you've become because of them. She said, that's the person I fell in love with. I think about her and it's just like, yeah, women like her are one in a million. And I'll marry her one day. She's a hell of a woman. But I thought about that for, I don't know, a number of hours last night. I had a hard time sleeping. And so I said, okay, maybe that's the case. Maybe I am an inspirational person. So I figured, okay, well then we'll tell my story. And we'll let the fans decide. We'll let people decide, if I'm inspirational. Let you guys decide if I'm inspirational. So, yeah. This is the life of Rob Jefferson. Up until the point when I was about 11 years old, I had as good of a life as anybody could have. I mean, it was carefree. It was the easiest life ever, to be honest. A lot of the early parts are flashes, when I was in the first grade, second grade, Really, I don't remember a whole lot until I got to the third grade. In the third grade, I had a teacher named Linda Garl. I lived in Kent, Washington, went to Neely O'Brien Elementary School. My gym teacher was Mr. Furukawa, or he was the one that taught gym. And yeah, they were, it was an incredible experience. Miss Garl made me feel like I could do anything. She was an incredible boost to a child's self-esteem. She was super hippie, so she was all about like the rainforest and shit, and culture and all that kind of cool stuff. But we did so many cool things in that class, like as a celebration of culture, because we had kids from, different cultures throughout our class. We had one kid whose family escaped North Korea. We had another kid from Vietnam. We had a kid whose family hailed from Africa. We had this week where we ate like all these different, styles of food from different ethnicities. I learned how to use chopsticks in the third grade. We had a candlelight dinner once. We made our own news episode, which I don't even know if you could ever find that episode, but we made our own news episode. We went to King 5 News in Seattle and did like a whole thing with them. And they taught us everything, all that kind of stuff. Then we went back to class and we made our own news segment. I wanted to be an anchor. Andy Dye got to be the anchor. Damn it, Andy. But Andy got to be the anchor. And I was the weather guy. And I remember, and I guess it's kind of fitting, the way this video is playing out. I was the weather guy. And I remember there was one moment when I was running over the weather and I zoned out and just stared, like I just stared at the camera. Like that for a few minutes. And they were like, "Rob, are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then I just went right back to what I was doing because I lost my train of thought. I was super ADD when I was younger. For the most part, memories of my mom are pretty solid. I was a mama's boy back then. Everywhere mom went, I had to go. Mom went grocery shopping, I had to go grocery shopping. Mom went to the mall, I had to go to the mall. I went everywhere she did. Mom went yard sailing, I would go yard sailing with her. For Dad, the memories are not that clear. The only real memories that I have of Dad is watching Star Trek The Next Generation, watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which sucked, and then watching, watching him on the computer. Because he lived in front of the computer system. Dad lived in front of his computer. And I never really understood why. In hindsight, I never understood why somebody would do that. Great big huge world out there to see, and they're going to waste their days away sitting in front of a computer all day long. I mean, Dad would eat in front of it, he would sleep in front of it, he lived in front of that thing. It drove a wedge between him and my mom. It was because of that they got divorced. They were like two ships passing in the night. They happened to exist in the same house, but from my perspective, that's what led to their divorce. At 11 years old, everything changed. My dad grabbed my sister and myself And he said, we're moving to Kentucky. I remember distinctly. He took us in the living room and he said, how would you guys feel if we moved back to Kentucky? And it's one of those questions that a parent asks with a guaranteed answer. Like, it's happening. I just want to see how you guys will respond to it. Never understood why a parent would do that in the first place. What's the point of asking your kid what their opinion is on something if the decision's already been made? Just tell them it's already been made. Initially, I was excited. I was excited at the prospect of it because it would mean that I got to see grandma and grandpa and, all those characters, my cousins and my uncle. And I never really knew them that well growing up. I knew of them. We would talk to them on holidays, but my dad never cared for his side of the family. Years later, I would find out why, but my dad never cared for his side of the family, so we would never really spend any time with them. We never really got to know them at all. He always kept them at a distance. But so my dad took my sister and I, and moved us to Kentucky. And for me, it was the most crushing experience. Because I remember distinctly sitting in the back seat of the car, looking back at Mom, waving goodbye, and she was crying, and she was waving goodbye to us. Years later, I found out that my dad had just called my mom and just said, "I'm taking the kids and leaving," and we left. Yeah. That started some of the darkest years of my life. It was a total 180. It was a total shift. I had this carefree life where everything was taken care of for me, and I never had to worry about anything. I had a Super Nintendo and a Super Scope 6, and I had a Sega Genesis, and I had all these things. I had a life with great friends, and every day was spent having fun. When we moved to Kentucky, we had almost nothing. My great aunt put us up in this house that was essentially falling apart. If child services had walked into that house, they would have taken us away. I mean, like that. They would have snatched us up so fast. My granddad let us use his old station wagon. And I remember Dad working all the time or sitting in front of his computer. That was his escape from a life that he didn't like. He was a single father raising 2 kids, a role he was unprepared for. My sister and I were kind of largely left to raise ourselves. My dad worked 3 jobs. And I was so angry. I was so angry at the world. How dare my dad take me away from that life that I enjoyed? What's his problem? What's his deal? I was enrolled in Bryan Station Middle School. I was enrolled in that school because my dad went to Bryan Station Middle School and Bryan Station High School, and he wanted me to follow in his footsteps. I hated that school. Yeah. But mostly it was the culture change that I hated so much. Seattle was very, very progressive. It was very liberal. They were very forward thinking. Kentucky is stuck in the past. It's like Mark Twain once said, if the world ends, I want to be in Kentucky because they're always 20 years behind. Teachers didn't care. They were paycheck teachers. Like, I'm here to collect a check. Whether you get an education or not, that's not my concern. I mean, I would find out later on that wasn't the case, but at the time, that was my philosophy. Acting out didn't make things any better. And being out of district meant that I was basically booted out of the school. And so I had to go to the school that was in my district, which was Southern Middle School. Now, because we had virtually nothing, we didn't have anything new. If we did have something new, it was something that my granddad bought for us on Christmas. But I remember having a FUBU shirt that I wore till it had holes in it because it was the only nice shirt that I had. Everything else was bought from like Walmart or Kmart or something like that. For me, I was looking for an escape. I was looking for a way out. Comic books were an existing way out, but I was looking for something else. I turned to wrestling, the Monday Night Wars. I could live vicariously through Stone Cold Steve Austin. You couldn't tell Stone Cold Steve Austin shit. The boss couldn't tell him anything. He did what he wanted, when he wanted, and how he wanted. And I lived vicariously through that. I loved that. Shawn Michaels had this kind of charisma, right? He walked into the ring and the crowd cheers and screams, and I wanted that life. The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, those guys were my escape. Dragon Ball Z was my escape from a life that I didn't like. For years it went on this way. And it only ever got worse. Dad was he had undiagnosed bipolar disorder. And I remember he would come home. If I didn't do the dishes, if I didn't do my chores, he'd get off work 2:30 in the morning. He'd be home by 3. And if I hadn't done my chores, he'd come in my room and jerk me awake. And I mean violently, just like, get up, come here. When you're 12, 13 years old, that's traumatizing. For years after that, I would wake up in the dead of night. And even now, I still do occasionally. I'll just jerk awake in the dead of night. Like, it's just like my dad shaking me out of a dead sleep. And he'd take me into his room, make me stand there, and he'd sit on his bed and tell me how worthless I am, that I didn't matter, that if he could do it all over again, he never would have had me, that I was a mistake, I was never going to be anything. Just every ounce of anger, every ounce of vitriol that he had, he would just dump onto me and my sister all the time. All the time. When he wasn't doing that, he was sitting in front of his computer, typing away, living on the internet, escaping a life he hated. I firmly believe, and you cannot convince me otherwise, I firmly believe that at that point in his life, my dad hated myself and my sister. He despised us. Didn't want to have anything to do with us. What kept him going and being a parent, I will never fully understand. Maybe the shame of what it would mean to abandon us. The shame he would feel as a byproduct of that, the shame he felt when he thought about doing it. Maybe that's what kept him going, I don't know. My stepmom would say he loved us, but she wasn't there. During the worst of it, she wasn't in that house during the worst of it. That's why we loved going to see her, making that hour drive up to Covington to go see her, because then we knew my dad would see us like his kids. He would treat us like kids. He would show us affection, he would love us. For that 2 or 3 days, we would felt like we belonged, like we mattered. And that's a terrible feeling for a child to have. So going into my teenage years, I had no self-esteem. I had no self-confidence. I had no true value at all as a human being. I was a guy who just existed. Going into high school, it was a shock to me when I met Anna, Danielle, and Michael. Mr. Hoskins' physics class, or general science class. Brad Hoskins, he was a cool teacher. He was a really, really cool guy. We talk about like Metal Gear Solid video games and stuff like that, but he was a really, really cool guy. But Michael was this awesome kid, awesome guy. I remember I had a sleepover at his house once. I went to church with his family. It was a great experience. Anna was cool. Danielle was cool. Danielle liked me. And it was so foreign to me that a woman would be interested in me, that a woman would like me, that she would find me attractive, that anybody would find me interesting. It was so foreign to me, but it was so welcoming. I loved the idea. Like for the first time since I moved to Kentucky, I mattered. People gave a shit about me. I had a place in the world. I remember being in chorus, boys chorus. I inherited my mom's singing voice. It just needed to be polished a little bit. Just needed to be brought out. By this point, Mom's been in Kentucky for 1.5 years, 2 years. She moved back. And I remember being so angry at her when she came back. You left us. Because that's all I knew. All I knew was what my dad told me. She left us. That when the time came when she had to make the choice between living the life that she always wanted to live or being a mom, she chose to go live her life because some feminist friends told her it was a good idea. And she lived that life right into the arms of a man who almost beat her to death. And I remember her telling me that story. Well, I was caught up in, that I should go find myself, and I was caught up that I should put myself first. I remember her telling me that. I remember looking her in the eye. One of the most shameful things I've ever done in my life. I remember looking her in the eye and telling her, you got what you deserved. You left your family and you almost died. You got what you deserved. And I'll never forget the look on her face. And to the day I die, I will never forget the look on her face. She was angry, but more so than that, she was hurt. Her firstborn, her little boy, The little boy that used to go yard sailing with her all the time. The little boy who was attached to her at the hip. Hated her so much. I will never forget the look on her face when I said that. But having felt like I belonged in high school, having, being in boys' chorus and knowing that I was going to be in singers my sophomore year, I was so ecstatic. Lafayette High School, being part of Scapa, being in singers. Oh God, it was like the one thing I wanted the most. John Stegner, one of the greatest teachers I ever had. He was a chorus teacher at the time. I was so excited. I was so hyped. I knew that was gonna. I was so ecstatic. I was over the moon for the possibility of being in singers. Because it wasn't the fact that I was going to be in singers that was so significant. What it meant was that, I was doing good things. In the face of everyone who told me that I was worthless. My middle school guidance counselor. My middle school assistant principal. Miss Miller. She was a bitch. In the face of my dad. That they were all wrong. That I could do great things. That I could achieve great things. That summer, my dad came to me and he said, "Son, we're moving to Northern Kentucky." That was the first in what would become a long line of instances when I felt like maybe I just couldn't be happy. Happiness was not meant for me. That my life was meant to be rife with struggle and strife. And that was it. I was just meant to give things up over and over and over and over again. Meant to sacrifice, to lose, to have to walk away. So we packed up all our shit, and we moved to Northern Kentucky, and I was enrolled in Ryle High School, and I stood out like a sore thumb. It was up in Northern Kentucky, Boone County. That's white folks' country. I was one of 2 black kids in the whole school. I never felt so out of place in my life. I actually ran away at one point. I tried to go back to Lexington. I ended up going the entirely wrong way. The opposite direction. Eventually I ended up leaving. My dad got angry at me. He said he felt betrayed, but I remember thinking, what the hell reason do you have to be angry, old man? All you've done is take me away from things I love. All you've done is tear me down. All you've done is crush me on every conceivable level. You have no reason to be angry. You have no reason to feel betrayed. I wanted to tell him that, but I was too scared. He would have flown off the handle, would have beat the hell out of me and my sister. He would have beat me to a pulp. That's what he used to do when we lived on Wilkes. He used to beat the hell out of me and my sister. People will say he tried his best, but people will say Dad loved us. A parent doesn't treat their child like that when they love them. That's not what happens. So eventually I left Northern Kentucky, moved in with my mom and my sister in this little 2-bedroom apartment in Woodhill. I was enrolled at Henry Clay High School. Stayed there for a couple years. And I met people who would go on to become some of the best friends I ever had. Josh Paulus, Aaron Yates, Aaron Sloan, Dustin Silvestri, Patrick Kelly, Hippie, who's since passed away, God rest his soul. My life was finally coming together. It felt like I was getting back to where I was before we moved to Kentucky. I was finally finding happiness. When I was around 21 years old, I started a job at UK. And that job had a 3 or 6 month probationary period. I can't remember which one. And it just so happened that Laser Quest Regionals fell during that 3-month period. We worked our asses off for a year and a half, 2 years, playing our asses off, going to side tournaments, traveling the country to get better. And had I been able to make it, we would have advanced out of the region. As it was, we ended up having to take a couple of people who basically sucked and throw them onto the team and cross our fingers, hope for the best. And we almost advanced out. But had I been there to play, we would have advanced out of the region. we would have done incredibly well. We would have turned heads. And we were. We were turning, like our center, Lexington, was considered the worst in the country, and we were turning heads. People were just like, damn, like these guys are getting good. I was achieving a thing. I was excelling at something. That job was the first real choice that I had to make between being a child and being an adult. When I was a child, I thought as a child, acted as a child, played as a child. When I became a man, I put away childish things. I remember asking off to go to regionals, and my boss was like, no, if you can find somebody to cover for you, that's fine, but you don't have vacation time, so you can't take off. I didn't understand why they didn't realize how big of a deal it was to me. Like, don't you guys understand how significant this is? Don't you guys grasp how big this is? I've been working so hard for this. That was when I had to accept the nature of the work world. Who gives a shit? You're there to do a job. So do the job. So I had to go to the guys and I had to say, look, I'm sorry, I can't play. I've got to work that weekend. I got to work. When I started that job, I did not know what it would ask of me. I did not know what it would require me to give up. I remember being so pissed off, being so angry, well, I'll show them. There's a funny thing about showing your boss what's what. You don't actually show them anything. All you end up doing is shooting yourself in the foot. Cost myself promotions. I cost myself easier shifts. I didn't see it that way. At the time, I was just pissed off. She's like, man. Before I knew it, I was working first, second, and third shift in a 1-week period. Working first shift Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, off Thursday, work second Friday, off Saturday. No, I'm sorry, work third shift Saturday. So I was getting off at 7 a.m. on Sunday. And then I had to stay awake until like 8 p.m. and then go to bed and be at work at 7 a.m. on Monday. And I did that for years. Eventually it calmed down and I was working second shift and then third shift on the weekends, but I had to give up my social life. My 20s are a blur of work, sleep, and occasionally hanging out with friends. I had to give all that up. Over and over and over again. Constantly. Here I was, in my mid-20s, mid to late 20s. The world had passed me by, and I was resigned to my fate. I was like, this is the end. This is it. This is how it goes. I am at this job now. I will retire from this job, and I will work second and third shift for the rest of my life. I will find happiness when and where I can. And I spent time with family. Finally got my first apartment. I was like maybe 24 years old when I did. I finally got my first apartment. And it was a terrible apartment. God, that apartment sucked. It had no heat. I'm sorry, it had heat. It had no air conditioning. That's what it was. I remember the summers would get so hot, 90 degrees, 90% humidity. And I got no air conditioning, sweating my ass off in that house, or in that apartment. The heating unit was an external gas heating system with a pilot light. So it sat outside the apartment door. The problem was that I lived almost immediately next to the exit, or to the entrance and exit to the apartment building. So whenever it was wintertime and folks would come in and out, like a gust of wind would blow out the pilot light. And the first time I learned that was the case is when I came home after a long day's work, came home, and the whole place is just freezing cold because the pilot light was blown out. Had to call the landlord. They came in, we lit the pilot light, and had to sit there and try to wait for everything to warm up. I didn't have a car. I had a license, but no car. So I had to walk to work every day. There was a point, when it would take me about an hour and a half to walk to work. In the wintertime, when it was 2 degrees outside, I was bundled up and walking to work. In the summertime, when it got down to a cool 80 degrees at night with 70% humidity, I was walking to work. On the summer days, when it was 90 degrees, 100 degrees, walking back home. Not enough money to make a car, to buy a car. I was making like $8 an hour, $10 an hour, $11 an hour. Didn't have enough money, but it's what I had to do. It's the only way for me to keep my job, is to walk back and forth to work. This went on for a number of years. And then one day, I'm at my mom's house, and we're supposed to pick up my sister. She was enrolled in Morehead State. My sister was a girl who made all the right choices in life. She did all the right things. She got a bachelor's degree, she got good grades at school, she went to Europe, traveled around and everything. She made all the right choices. She was going to come home for the weekend. My mom was slated for she had a doctor's appointment where she was supposed to get these plates replaced in her knees, or installed in her knees rather, because she'd worn the cartilage down in her kneecap. She was hugely overweight, 500 pounds at one point. She got a call from the doctor, and it was supposed to be the update for her surgery. Hey, you qualify, you don't qualify. Because whenever you go in for surgery, they put your blood through the ringer to make sure you're not going to bleed out on the operating table because you're not hemophobic. Whatever it is, where you lack the ability to make platelets. Any of those things. To minimize any risk to the hospital and to you. And she gets a call. And she was excited because it was the doctor to the hospital, number to the hospital. And then she got really, really quiet. And then she said, okay. Okay. I'll be there. And she got off the phone, and my thought was, well, it's bad news. Because by this time, my mom and I had long since reconciled. And I was like, well, did you not qualify for the surgery? And she looked up at me and she just started crying. I was like, Mom, what's wrong? And she said she had cancer. And I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know how to handle it. I was just like, what do you mean you have cancer? What do you mean you have cancer? That's not funny. She wasn't joking. So I said, Mom, stay here. I'll go get Libby. Jumped in the truck, drove all the way out to Morehead. Had an hour to drive out there, pick her up, an hour to drive back. Libby could tell something was wrong as soon as she got in the car. Because I inherited my mom's personality. So here I was, almost always vibrant and joyful, And she could tell something was wrong. I told her, Mom's sick. Lips. Mom's sick. We get back to the house. And I can't remember if I told Libby or Mom told Libby. But she found out. And she lost it. Just lost it. And for the next 2 or 3 years, it was hoping against hope that everything would be okay. Well, Mom's recovering. Everything's going to be fine. Everything's cool. 3 rounds of chemotherapy, the whole 9 yards, and it looked like she was making progress. She goes in for the diagnosis, figure out where things stand. Incurable. My sister and I had planned a cruise for the weekend of her for the month or two after her graduation. It was my gift to her for graduating college. bought us a couple cruise tickets to the Bahamas, I think it was. And I didn't want to go. I told Mom, like, I don't want to go. Like, I want us to stay here. My mom said, no, it's fine. Go. You guys go on your cruise. She's like, I'm going to go out to Flagstaff and spend time with your sister Joy. And she's like, I'm going to take a vacation. I need a vacation after all this. She would try to find a way to make it funny and try to find a way to laugh it off. She's like, after all this, I need a vacation. That kind of thing. My sister and I went on the cruise, and we enjoyed it as best we could. But, how do you enjoy a cruise when your mom's dying? We get back to port, and we've got what seems like a mountain of missed calls, text messages. Call me back as soon as you get this. Call me back. All coming from my sister Joy and her partner and so on and so forth. We call Joy up. Joy says, Mom's really, really sick. And the doctors say she has a week to live. At that moment, I've never been so focused in my life. My first thought was, get my sister to Kentucky, or to Flagstaff, because she can't handle it. She's like, when we found, she just started crying. She's like, I just want to be with Mom. I just want to see Mom. I just want to go see Mom. That's all she kept saying. I want to be with Mom. I want to go see Mom. I want to go see Mom. I want to go see Mom. Just kept crying and sobbing and saying that over and over and over again. I want Mom. I want to see Mom. I want to go see Mom. So we booked her on a flight. I dropped her off at Miami Airport, and she was there within the day. We had driven Mom's truck down to Miami when my sister and I went on this trip. So I had to drive the truck all the way back to Kentucky. I-75, straight up. Called my boss on the way. Hey, man, Mom's got a week to live. I'll be back when I'm back. And he says, dude, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. That was that. Get back to Kentucky. Fly out the next day. Get out to Flagstaff. And a week later, Mom was dead. My mom died. My life felt like it spiraled out of control when that happened. I felt like the foundation was gone, or at least part of it was anyway. My dad had long since reconciled as well, so I still had him. And I remember calling him up when Mom died. I was in pieces. I was in tears. Dad, I want Mom. All I want is Mom. I remember watching them take her body out of the house. We had her cremated. Mom didn't want a fancy funeral. And even if she did, we couldn't afford one. I still have her ashes. Well, my sister has them because I'm very irresponsible. Have them turn into a diamond necklace one day. Got back to work. My sister came and lived with me. And I did the best I could to be as supportive as I could, but I felt myself just falling down this slippery slope. Falling down this path. And I didn't know where it was going. I didn't know where I was falling to. I didn't know where this was leading to. I just knew that it was easier to fall than to try and catch myself. It was just easier to slide down this path. And so I did. Sometime after that, my dad calls me up. You got to come down to Tennessee. My dad has since moved down to Tennessee. Married my stepmom, married Anita. One of the greatest women I've ever known in my life. Calls me up, says, son, you got to come down to Tennessee. Why? My granddad called me up shortly after that. My dad wouldn't tell me why. He's like, you need to come down here and I'll tell you. My granddad called me up shortly after that. He said, "Hey, have you heard the news about your dad?" And I was like, "No, what are you talking about?" He says, "Your dad's got cancer." Called up Libby. Libs, we got to go down to Tennessee. Went to my boss. Dad's got cancer. Drove down to Tennessee, told Dad, the grandpa told us. Dad was pissed. He was so pissed. He was mad as hell. Dad had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The percentage of people who survive stage 4 pancreatic cancer is near 1%. The percentage of people who survive past 5 years is like 5%. Dad lasted less than 1. I remember standing in the shower after Dad died, and I just fell apart. Because despite all the mistakes that my dad made when he was younger, all the stupid things he did, all the ways in which he tore my sister and I down, the time came when he became every ounce the man that everybody knew he was. That Anita knew he was, that I knew he was, that my sister knew he was. When he became a father. When he became that man, he was a great man. An incredible man. When he became that version of himself. I mean, truth to tell, I could live 1,000 lives 1,000 times and never come close to being that kind of man he was. I'd like to be. Maybe one day I will be, but I fell apart. Because what was there left? What did I have anymore? My dad was gone, my mom was gone. I had Anita, but at the time I wasn't that close to her. I mean, I was close, but not as close as I was to my biological parents. The foundation of the life that I lived was gone. It was just me, and I was free falling. Free falling into oblivion. And I just let it happen. It was so easy to do. To just... By this point, YouTube was a fledgling thing. It was doing pretty well, but it wasn't huge. It was growing, but it wasn't huge. But despite the success that I was starting to gain, it didn't matter. Because I was utterly alone. Or at least I felt that way. I knew I wasn't. I had Anita, I had my sister, I had Alan and Mike and Galen and Ross, and I had those people that I could reach out to, but it was easier to just be alone. To just sit alone with my thoughts. It was easier to just be by myself. It was easier to just give up. And before I knew what was going on, I had slipped down into depression. The onset of depression is such a quiet thing. It's such a quiet, unnoticeable thing. It's like slipping into a warm bath. It's just... There was a point where I tried to kill myself. Bought a handgun. To my coworkers, it was for home protection. For me, it was an easy way out. I didn't, obviously, but I wanted to. That's one of the most shameful things I've ever had to admit. Nowadays, this serves a purpose of home protection. It serves a purpose that I lied to everybody about when I first bought it. Yeah, but that thing would have more than done the job too. A Smith & Wesson 686 with a 7-inch barrel. Take a rhino out with that thing. So, I kept on keeping on. As time progressed, I found solace in things outside of my depressive state. Slowly started to pull myself out. And it was a hard journey. It was a hard road. By this time, YouTube had taken off. It had blown up. The channel was at 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 subscribers. On its way to 1 million. I mean, just blowing up by leaps and bounds. 3,000 subscribers a day. The channel was exploding. Once I came out of it all, I kind of had this existential crisis. Who the hell is Rob Jefferson? Who am I now? I got no mom, no dad. I got my sister, she's struggling. Just me in the world. So I turned to philosophy, politics. I turned to learning the lessons that my dad tried to teach me, that my former boss, Galen Tolliver, taught me, that my former co-workers, Alan Ferris, Mike Baldwin, Ross Reeser, taught me. I turned to this, turned to all these different things. And I came to this one absolute piece of logic. This one absolute thing. Life is too short to be miserable. That a time will come when we will all die. That's inevitable. Nobody lives forever. A time will come when we will die. It's the nature of the world we live in. We will pass on from this world. And that will be the end of us. We have to accept it. The question is, what do we do during that time? What do we make of this life that we live? So I set to work, trying to find a way to improve my life. Started viewing YouTube as a business, started running it like a business. I want safety and security. I want to own a piece of property so that if it all goes south, I can go back and work at UK or get a degree in history and never have to worry about mortgage payments. I want a strong woman in my life. Somebody that can make me a better man and who I can make a better woman. I want kids. I want a family. So I started working towards these things. I learned balance. In Greek mythology, there's a character named Daedalus. Daedalus was a craftsman and artist. One day, he was tasked by King Minos, the king of Crete, with building a labyrinth under the court of King Minos. This labyrinth was a giant maze, at the center of which resided the Minotaur. And every year, 7 men and 7 women from Athens would be brought to Crete and they would be sacrificed to the Minotaur. This continued on until Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos, and the Greek hero Theseus killed the Minotaur. In order to keep the Minotaur and the labyrinth's existence secret, the role that it played, King Minos imprisoned Daedalus in a tower. Looking to escape, Daedalus fashioned a set of wax wings, one for himself and one for his son Icarus. They were feathers held together by wax. These wings came with a warning for Icarus. Daedalus told him, "Do not fly too close to the water or it'll soak your wings. And don't fly too close to the sun or it'll melt the wax. You have to fly in the middle." Upon reaching the sky, Icarus grew full of hubris, ignored the warnings of his father, and looking to touch the sun, the heat melted the wings, melted the wax in the wings, and Icarus fell to the oceans and drowned. That's a cautionary tale. It's what I'll remember for the rest of my life because it teaches us the importance of balance. it teaches us the importance of understanding all things in balance. I had to find that for myself. I had to focus on these life lessons that I learned. That a man is nothing, absolutely nothing, without integrity, honesty. That if a man can't keep his word, if he can't treat those around him with respect, and if he especially can't treat the woman in his life as the most important thing in his life, then he's no measure of a man. He's a boy pretending to be a man. He's a coward. I had to come to the realization that life is nothing more than a series of leaps of faith. It's risks. You take a shot, you hope for the best, maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. There's a thing coming behind me. So. Anyway, I guess we'll wrap this video up here, since they're kind of shunting us off. I guess maybe this could be a TED Talk, I don't know. Let me know if you guys think this is inspiring at all. I don't really think it is, but I don't know. But yeah, to get to where I am after enduring all that, I guess maybe it is. To go through that entire life and then eventually go on to become a self-made man, running my own business. And sure, I'm not The Rock, I'm not conquering the world, and I have no desire to, but I guess maybe it is inspiring to reach such a low place and then to aspire and reach such a high place. I mean, to be honest with you guys, I have it all. I don't say that out of arrogance, I say that out of fact. I have it all. I've got probably the greatest woman that I've ever met in my life. Not probably, definitively, the greatest woman I ever met in my life. The greatest woman that any man could ever have. You guys will never fully understand how much Mariah means to me. And you guys will never fully understand how great of a woman she truly is. I run my own business. I've got an amazing fan base. I've got friends, family. I have everything that I strive to achieve. Everything I wanted out of life. After all that struggle and strife, I finally made it. So I guess on some level that's inspiring. I don't know. That's your all's decision. Now let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. But anyway, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. It's cold as hell out here. I've been standing out here for probably about an hour and a half recording this, removing all the jump cuts and the edits. Nutty the squirrel is gone. I don't know where Nutty the squirrel is. I guess he got tired of talking to me, or got tired of seeing me. And yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.